Joe Orth and I are starting a podcast. What should we call it?
Hey, don't pick on me. You know why? Because this is why. Let's see what he says.
The Joe Show?
Give Joe the business?
That's right.
Cup of Joe.
Cup of Joe.
What is happening here?
Would you listen?
We'll give you a chance.
Thank you.
That's Joe.
That's Rooster.
And this is the Together We Shall podcast, episode 38. What is up, bro?
Man, a lot. I feel like we talked yesterday, like it's technically not even like summer, according to like the solstice. But like once kids are out of school and like, all that, like people are traveling, like summer's hectic. I know you got like 17 state trip planned, but it's just crazy. It's like, man, like there was nothing for us for a while. And then it's just like summer, which is always tough because got to play Marine for 2 of those weeks. So it's like,
You just finished playing Marine for a couple of weeks. How was Quantico?
oh man, the crossroads of the Marine Corps. Nothing better than beautiful entrances to the base, and then black mold in your barracks room.
Oh my God, I love that. That's perfect.
They're like, the general's never going to go into this room. It's like, plus, Canada was burning and that was seeping in. That was fun.
Smoke everywhere while you're on the range. You think the range on fire? Could you even see the targets from 500?
It was tough. I mean, I couldn't really. I could see with my own eyes or like zooming in on my phone. I didn't have to shoot, but even the Marines with their optic were like, yeah, it's tough. I don't know if it's true or not. And I didn't take the time to research it, but someone said while we were on the range that the air quality index at one point when we were out there was 291, which was like the highest in the world at that time. So like worse than China. You didn't notice it unless you like tried to like move briskly. Like I had to trot to the bathroom. And I was like, okay, yeah, I can't breathe. It's like,
Yeah,
it's crazy.
While you were dealing with that, I was dealing with elevation and altitude. And I went out to Boulder, Colorado for an ASIC shoot. They got a new shoe coming out July 1st. We had to go model it. Anyway, though, that is different too, bro. Like you start walking up altitude and suddenly I'm like, I feel like my arthritis is cramping up. I feel my lungs. I can't turn to the guy next to me. I'm like, bro, you having the same issue? Thank God he was my age, so he too was dealing with it. But anyway, yeah, it's beautiful though. It's so worth the reward when you get up there and then you look down. You're like, man, this is beautiful. It was cool.
Yeah, like I don't necessarily have a bucket list, but Colorado is definitely specifically. I want to go to Aspen for the Food and Wine Classic. You never see like a movie or something where you're like, Colorado. Like you only see like beauty of Colorado.
It's wild. My first time to ever go to Colorado was actually while I was on my way to boot camp, literally like 29 years ago. Like next month, it stopped at the Denver airport. And then we got to sleep there for a minute. And then we bed on down. They said sleep. We didn't really sleep. And then we went to San Diego. But anyway, that was the first time I ever went. And I was like, man, I want to come back here. And I had a chance to go back a couple of years ago. It was life-changing, connection with nature, reflection within. And then to be out there again, man, I wish it for you. In fact, I would love to go with you one day. Maybe we'll go see the Kents out in Colorado Springs. I think we owe them a trip.
I do want to do that. Run the gorge, race the gorge. The one where they took that. There's that video of Adrian like shooting out like a rocket, and then it's just like, look, dude, no sharp turns, you'll fall. Like,
yeah, for everybody who's wondering what we're talking about, watch Spotlight Saturday, episode 224. The intro shows Adrian running in this thing. Anyway, it's beautiful out there. But then after that, I had a chance to go and straight to get Briley in Madison, Wisconsin. She graduated college, had to move her out of her apartment, bring her home. We got it back home just in time for Kamden's graduation from high school and his chapters that are opening up. Today was a really special day. I don't want to talk about some of that. So I think without further ado, maybe we should bring our guest on. What do you think, Joe?
do it.
Yeah. Kamden, welcome to the Together We Shall podcast, man.
Thank you. So,
what do you think?
It's been long awaited.
Oh, really? I had no idea that you've been waiting, and now he's saying it says he's surprised.
But I think this is a good time for me to come on here.
Man, I couldn't agree with you more. So, with that said, where are you physically located, and why do you think you are a guest on the Together We Shall podcast?
I'm physically located upstairs, probably like, I don't know, how far from you?
20 feet.
Yeah, roughly.
But where is that
Uh,
house?
In Virginia Beach, Virginia.
And why do you think you're on the show?
Because I'm your son. I think that's
Ah,
why.
All
Would you
right,
say-
this is the shortest podcast on record. That was great.
no, I think you're right, man. I think that if you weren't my son, the likelihood of you being the guest on 38 is probably lower. So that is definitely a contributing factor. However, we think there's an opportunity here for you to really provide a perspective that we haven't had on this show yet. And that is the perspective of a young person who not only grew up with a sister with special needs and all that that entailed, but also a young person who finished high school and is now, put his right hand in the air to go forth and serve the country. I think there's a perspective here that is often not captured. And I would also add, Joe, how cool would it be, or how uncool would it be for you or I to go back to the day we graduated high school or that week and to listen to our perspectives, to go back 20 years ago and listen to that, where we were in life at that moment?
I mean, it's crazy. Like you say, 20 years ago, and I mean, it might have been the same day for my graduation. I don't know, 2003. I'd have to ask, my mom. At least that's the day that the ceremony was. I unfortunately, when I opened my diploma thing, it was blank.
What?
So, yeah, I walked at graduation, but I technically wasn't graduated yet. They if you
No.
if you weren't graduating that day, your diploma was blank, and then when you like shook everyone's hands, they gave you a colored die, and like X color meant you still owed tuition, or this color meant this, or like mine, whatever color it was like still has like academic due outs or whatever it was. They were like, hey, you have to take this test, or like whatever it was. I ended up getting my diploma like a week later. But I walked. So that,
Yeah,
I mean,
you
I guess-
walked. Yeah. Well, we had the opportunity to see Kamden walk just earlier this week, and Kamden, I guess we'll open up with like, how's it feel, man, to graduate high school?
Oh, yeah, I mean, it feels great because of all of everything I've put in over the past few years, but it's very bittersweet just because this is whenever I start to spread from my friends. And like yesterday, I had said my first goodbye to my friend until after boot camp or whenever I see him next. So it's very bittersweet. Obviously, I'm so happy I made it through and I graduated, but at the same time, I don't know if I'm fully ready to leave everybody and move on to the next chapter in my life.
That friend, what branch did he or she go
No,
into?
so I won't see him till after
Oh,
my
till you
boot
get
camp.
back.
But he's going into the Navy, but he's doing he's going through college first.
Gotcha.
You decided to put your hand in the air and go to the United States Coast Guard, man. That's pretty special. What motivated you to do that, and what are you excited about?
So I always knew I was going to join the military. Just because of, not because of you, but it was you're such an influential person in my life and you were in the military. And so I always knew that's what I wanted to do forever. And I always thought Marine Corps, but then not until probably the beginning of this school year, maybe a little bit later than that. But I started to like really look into it and actually like see the options. And Coast Guard, which I'd never thought of just because it's not highly talked about. I found a lot of passion in, like more passion than any of the other branches, just due to like I've always loved being on boats. You can do search and rescue in the Coast Guard, and helping people is a big thing I knew I wanted to do. So everything came together, and Coast Guard had the golden seal on it. It was everything I wanted, all in the same place. So that's what made me pick Coast Guard.
Man, I don't think I've ever said it, so I'm just going to ask you to say it, Rooster. I need you to go ahead and say what time it is.
Oh, goodness. Ladies and gentlemen, it's that part of the show. We call it Miller time. And this one's really special for me because I literally was at the Miller Lite Brewery a week ago.
So yeah. So I don't have a Miller Lite, but I do have a Modelo, which, in case neither of you knew, is now the #1 selling beer in America, knocked off Bud Light. That's a whole nother story. But I wanted to toast Kamden as one of the newest members of the armed services. So
Yeah.
cheers, Kamden. And I also know you don't have a beverage, but I'm sure that if you open the door and call down to your mom, she would love to bring Boo Boo Bear a beverage because she's only going to get to do that so many more times.
She probably would love to do that.
You want to holler down at her while I go ahead and get my beer going and see how long it takes her?
Yeah.
Tell her what you want. And beers are authorized because it's the interwebs, like Wisconsin. Joe and I had, Kamden and I had our first beer together. Yeah, I brought a Spotted Cow back with me from Wisconsin. That's what I'm drinking for today's Miller time.
Just one?
I brought a couple back, and this is the one I'll have today. But Kamden and I got to belly up to a bar in Wisconsin because if you're with your guardian or your parent, like you can
18.
be 16, and so we got to do that more than once, and it's cool. So I figured it'd be great. Spotted Cow, Kamden. Surprised that that's what I went with?
No, not really.
What about, are you surprised at my Modelo?
No. But I was expecting, I will say that originally I was expecting Miller Lite.
Oh, there's Mom. Boo Boo Bear, what do you have?
Just some water.
He's hydrating, Joe. You know why? Because the recruiter told him today. What did the recruiter tell you, buddy? He's like, hey, young man, now that you've made this decision that like less than 0.5% of American youth make, you need to be focusing on
just my physical wellness, nothing else.
Yeah.
Well, and to study a little bit, know some things.
You have to study. Is there like a study guide they gave you that might be like at your fingertips?
Yeah, right here. The helmsman.
The helmsman. Oh, look at that.
Tells me everything I'll need.
So we're going to do some road tripping over the next 30 days, Joe, doing some helmsman reading. It's kind of like our green Bible in the Marine Corps, you know, the green book of knowledge. Joe's looking around.
I saw mine the other day. I'm pretty confident it was in the attic and I left it there.
Yeah.
But that's cool. They give it to you up front. Like, that's something that, like, I'm sure there's been a lot of changes at MEPS over the last 20 to 30 years between the two of us, but like, that's definitely something that is good. I mean, the armed services want you to join, right? We want you. And now in 2023, really probably the last, call it since post 9/11, right? Folks can do their own research, right? There's the internet and all these things that you have available to you. But then being able to then say, hey, you did your research. Here's a little bit of potentially the gold truth, you know what I mean? Or things you need to know. So bravo, Coast Guard. I like that.
Yeah.
I don't know if the Marine Corps does it.
I don't know what they do. Kamden, did you entertain the Marine Corps for a minute, right? Wasn't there a recruiter? He was like,
I wouldn't say I entertained it, but he showed up at the house at one point, so I must have done something.
yeah, he came looking for you. Then one day, a man in blue.
Yeah, just going down his list. He had R's.
Is that what it was? That's funny. So what about the next year, like, excites you about the Coast Guard?
So obviously I know I'm going to, start with this. I'm going to go to boot camp July 17th. After boot camp, I'll have a little 4 weeks or so where I don't know what I'll be doing. But after that, I'll go to BMA school, which is bosun mate A school, to start my rate. So that's bosun mate is the person who drives the boats. And so after A school, I don't know what I'll be doing. I don't know where I'll be. So I'm really looking forward to see what actually ends up occurring post A school.
Yeah, that's really cool, man.
But then you said you have a 4-week gap from boot camp graduation till A school?
A school. Yeah.
Where's that at?
Yorktown.
Uh,
Yeah. Right up the road.
So let's go backwards a little bit, Camden. Looking back, you've gotten to this point in your life. What would you say are, I don't know, some of your best memories from high school? I mean, you had a very unique 4-year high school experience, something different than any one of us with all things, pandemic and the likes. So what are your memories from high school?
Well, while I have a ton of memories, all of my best and favorite memories all come from like my friend group that I've built since roughly middle school. It's grown and new people join and leave, but definitely all of the memories with my friend group that I've carried throughout the past 4 years, my favorite memories.
When you say friend group, I mean, like, are we talking about like two dudes or we're talking about like a whole
No,
squad?
so there's a group of us. It's roughly maybe 6 or 7. So yeah, you could go with squad. Um, we all went to the same middle school, and now we all go to the same high school.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. And of course, right down the road is your best friends from when you were 2 years old. He was
Yeah.
four-ish, you were two-ish, Isaac. It's cool to see y'all grow up together. What does it mean to you now looking back, to have somebody that was literally right across the street for your whole days?
I don't think that it's something that everyone can say they had. A lot of people have stayed in the same house their whole life, but had people move to and from in a way and whatever. But having such a long connection that stayed so solid for so long is is something that I don't think I know anyone else who has. It's very unique, and it's very beneficial to have so much trust and whatnot in someone.
Yeah, I remember the two of you running around raising all kind of cane, like you would expect youngsters to do, from BB guns and airsoft guns, and goodness, climbing on street signs, to really being there for one another during some of the more challenging or emotional parts of life. I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you to just give us perhaps some insight. You grew up with Ainsley in your life. I mean, this is your sister, and we have a lot of people who listen to this podcast that is connected to the special needs world, and a lot of parents who have children who are siblings of people with special needs. So I would ask you, what would you like to share about that experience?
Well, growing up with a sibling with special needs is definitely not very common. I don't know many people who can relate to me. Obviously, from Ainsley's Angels, I've met a lot of people who can, but just from out and about, there's not many people I know, none of my friends or anything. Definitely different. And I wouldn't use the word hard because it isn't hard, but it's something that you don't get used to until you're a certain age. It's not something that you just adjust to. It doesn't really ever, I don't want to say it doesn't become normal, but it's something that your perspective on is constantly changing, for me at least. Just because as you grow, like whenever you're little, like for example, with me, people didn't really understand her. She just sat there, so people were confused, but they were young, so they didn't have any words to say about it. And then as I got older, people just understood that she looked different and they would point and whatever. And then as it kept going and kept going, it became maybe like a joke or two that wasn't very nice. And then as I grew even older, even after she passed, it became there was a lot of respect from coming from my peers. So it's something that was always changing. Even today, it's still changing on everyone's perspective on it. But as I've grown and people around me have grown, it's turned into a respect thing, which is good. But there was a part in time where kids were kids and they made jokes and they pointed and laughed and it was hard, but
I don't know if we've ever talked about it, Camden. I know, your parents and Briley have, but when Ainsley passed, like that's, the idea of losing a friend, losing a sibling, losing a parent, losing a child is hard, right? And especially at a certain age. But so I mean, you were what,
10.
12, 10? Yeah. So I mean, I can imagine at 10 years old, like death, loss of life is still confusing,
Very.
So what was that like at that
It
time?
was an emotional roller coaster. I obviously knew that it was coming at some point, so I was slightly ready for it. Not as ready as I could ever be, but I was slightly ready for it. Um, I think I emotionally was the most accepting of it in our family, just because I was still young and like, for example, I was ready to go to school the next day. I was ready to hang out with my friends. I didn't want to be treated differently because I just lost someone. I was very emotionally accepting of it. I think I was so young that the way that I like took it all in kind of like has changed almost. Like I feel like my parents, the way they took it in at first is still the same, but mine has changed just because as I grew. So I think that that's definitely weird with grief at some point because as your thoughts on the situation are changing as you grieve. It's just yeah.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. And that was like part two of that question is then being 10 years old and attending a grief camp, or maybe 11 at that time. Like, what was that like?
Um that I did it. I did enjoy that because I was young. It was a lot of fun, whatever. But I still, even now, I think about this and I feel like I didn't find the connection that I necessarily was looking for there. It definitely helped me so much, but it was more just me helping myself. There wasn't like people that I could relate to other than my family because everyone goes through completely different things. So I think it could only help so much.
I can imagine going through that at 10 years old for sure. Just confusion is all I could
Mhm.
probably imagine.
Since that time, have you found yourself in a position to show up for friends when they're finding themselves in dark places or going through the grief process?
Yeah, so I think like up until where I am now, I've fully like accepted everything that's happened and you're forever grieving, but I think that I'm very at peace with it. Um so people I talk to, I understand where they're at and all it takes is time. And so it's kind of hard to like let them know, but I can like give connections to let them relate. But everything else is so just because like I said earlier, everyone's experience is different and you can only help others so much.
Yeah, well, yeah, great perspective. And realizing that is wisdom beyond your years, man, because I have peers that still to this day feel like, well, I experienced something, so I can relate to you and we can be on the same sheet of music. But the fact that you get that you can only take somebody to a certain point and then they got to figure the rest out, like that's big. That's really awesome to hear you recognize that. Um, it makes me want to ask this question because I think this is valuable for one of the reasons I wanted you to come on. Like, what do you think people like Joe in their 30s, or people like me in my 40s, or our grandparents that are, 60s and 70s, the older generations, what do you think they don't understand about your generation? And to put into context, you were born in 2005. So, like, way past 9/11, iPhones were everywhere. The internet has always been a thing. Like, what do you want to offer?
Yeah, so I just went to brunch with my grandparents and sister and we slightly talked about this. Um and they it's a really hard topic because while like there is so many relations like between us and them because they were our age at one point and they're older and so they know more, but then on the whole like side of politics and technology, things aren't the same at all. And I feel like with the side of politics and technology not being the same, and those also being like the most popular and growing things right now, that there's such a big part of us that they don't understand. Like we love the same and we do everything the same, but the two I'd say key points right now that they don't understand are so big that it almost it's like it's a gap. It's a huge gap.
The technology one definitely makes sense to me, right? Like grandparents grew up with, you know, four television channels and maybe a block of ice in their freezer to keep everything cold and no mobile devices, and now you got Chat GPT and AI and AR and VR headphone or headsets and things of that nature. So that like gap definitely makes sense to me. But can you elaborate on the political gap?
Yeah, so obviously I was younger and whatnot, but I feel like even before the past two elections, things were so different. I feel like America has never been this split because of politics. I feel like if you're not this or that, then what are you? You have to be something, and I feel like it hasn't always been that way. Um, I feel like more people are into politics now because it's almost like you have to be. The older generation, it's hard for them to wrap their head around some of the things that the younger generation believes in and their morals even and all of that. They just because they grew up in such a different time.
Yeah.
Wow.
Do you
I
think
think this.
that? Yeah. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. No, I just like was wowed by that answer because it was so objectively phrased. Like he didn't put any emotion in it. You have no idea where he stands on issues, but so very well articulated. I just wanted to highlight that. That was well done, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And definitely, I concur. Like you said, the last few elections, right? You'd probably say since '08 Obama, there's been a divide within the country. Do you think that the country is ever going to come closer together than they were, 20, 30 years ago? Or do you think it's going to keep a nation divided? Politics, that is, dividing our nation.
That's hard to say. I feel like it could happen if people accepted each other and people understood, but I feel like people won't do that. So it won't until something significant happens of any sorts. I feel like it can't go back together. But we have the ability to go back together. We just don't have the motivation to.
Yeah. Do you think though, like politics aside, right? Left, right, middle, up, down, sideways, or whatever. Do you think it's politics or just like society and people being just weird lately? I don't know what word it would be,
Yeah,
right? Like,
yeah. I think that's fair. Yeah, I think that politics is the mask that covers their morals, and so they see where their morals would fit better into, and then they go based off politics because of their thoughts and beliefs and whatnot, and that's all just poured into politics. So I think it can be
Huge.
called politics because it's where they've put it, but at the end of the day, if you were to take everything that they're pouring into it out, it wouldn't be politics. It's more just who they are and what's going on and that.
Wow. I've never heard anybody use the phrase mask. That's a very great analogy. Makes perfect sense to me in terms of the way you articulated that. So with that said, that like, what do you wish for the future? Here we are in 2023. You swore today to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States of America. What do you wish for the future?
Um, for myself or for all?
Both.
For myself, I only wish the best, obviously. I hope I can get to a point where I am comfortable and able to provide and uh, with a happy family. Um, and for everyone else in the world and whatnot, I hope that even though like I feel like the past few years with the pandemic and everything else that's happened, everything's still tricky and people are still coming back to who they were and getting back on their feet in some cases and everything. But I hope that everybody finds peace again because I feel that there's not enough peace right now and people are just in such a not the best head places in their head right now because of all this past few years that um uh, yeah, everyone I want everyone to be able to go back to who they were and who they want to be.
how much of that do you think is tied to social media? But I'm just curious to your perspective.
I don't know about the more like older groups of people, but for the youth, I'd say social media is the number one thing that causes change in personality and mental health issues, and all of the not so positive things all come from social media, because you're yourself until you get on the internet and then you want to be someone else. No matter
Wow.
what, it happens to everybody because it's where you find perfection. And so then you chase it, but it's not realistic. So for the younger groups, uh, my age, Gen Z, social media is like the number one thing that has brought us to where we were. But for the older groups, I can't necessarily speak.
So what are you going to do with your kids? Like, are your kids going to have access to the internet at young ages? How are you going to supervise that? Like me and mom gave you and Briley a lot of freedom, and Briley told us at one point we gave y'all too much freedom, which is an interesting twist on things. But like, what's your plan here at age almost 18?
Yeah, so it's hard to say right now because I don't know where technology will be at that point, because it could be, oh, do you want to get your kid the brain chip? Like, I don't know what's going to be happening then. And no, I don't think I would want to get my kid the brain chip, but maybe like an iPad for a little kid to watch their movies and whatever, but it would be restricted. But honestly, I have no clue. I think I'm a little young to say that.
That was a really fair and smart answer. I was trying to get you to go on record so I could share with my grandchildren, should I have some, exactly what you said. So anyway, that was a little bit of humor there. Joe, I know you got something to say to that whole line of conversation because you have two youngsters yourself. You know, you and Leanne are having to make decisions about what you expose them to. And Kamden just said, you are yourself until you get on the internet. Like, wow.
Yeah, so that I wrote that down. That was definitely I'm still processing it. That was spot on. And especially like I know I don't have it in me to say like I'm not going to get on social media because I have FOMO, right? I want to see what's going on out there, and sometimes yeah, I do want to see. I don't want to see people struggling, but and that especially like close friends or anything, but like bigger picture people like having a bad day, it makes you feel normal, like, oh yeah, you can have a bad situation, right? And like this is how they're going to recover from it. um but the kids thing, man, yeah, and like it terrifies me, and this is coming from someone who's had every iPhone since inception of iPhones. Like I love technology, but I'll tell you, was it last week or 2 weeks ago when Apple introduced that new AR and VR combined headset? I was like, oh God, that's scary. Like I'm freaked out because the brain chip's coming, right? Something like that is coming. And it's hard to like, even on like the kids, like they're watching Netflix right now, right? Like the kids profile on Netflix, like even if you adjust the settings and you don't want them to see this, every now and then you walk by and you're like, that's a kid show, like, all right.
Yeah.
But you can't protect them 24/7. You have to let them learn from their mistakes and my mistakes as a father, and teach them the right way, and try to give them the tools to pave that path. I think, I don't know if it was Kelly, we talked about that, like the paving of a path, right? We as adults and humans pave our path, and it's on us, but we definitely want, people to help provide us with the concrete and the water and a shovel and a wheelbarrow and all those things. But in the end, it's on us to pave it and which way it goes, and if it goes up or if it goes down, or if it's flat. But yeah, the brain chip, it's coming for sure.
Yeah. What do you think, Kamden, are some of the things that maybe have shaped you into becoming who you are today? I mean, you sit here confidently and poised and well-spoken and with perspective that's deeper than surface. What do you think has contributed to getting to where you are now?
I'd say the biggest thing is people I've surrounded myself with. I think that pretty good at surrounding myself with people who are good for me. And if I'm surrounding myself with someone who isn't good for me, I don't absorb it. I don't take the bad in. Uh, but yeah, the people I surrounded myself with for sure. And then also just like my own perspective. I think that my brain works differently than like other people's because everyone's does, but I feel like I don't necessarily chase to be someone else. Like obviously, like I said earlier, like once you go on the internet, you're not yourself anymore. But I feel like on the whole class of that, in person, like I don't necessarily try being someone else whenever I see someone else, or I just I stay to what I believe in. I stay true to myself.
Yeah, dude, that's big. And that's great advice to really every human, the battle to stay true to who you are. And to stay true to who you are, it can change over time as life experiences and new things are mixed in, as Joe used the analogy of concrete and water to pave the path, to make the path wider. But at its core, you are who you are. You have the value. How would you describe Kamden?
Hmm, it's a hard one. I don't know if I can describe Camden. I don't.
What about like your values?
Um, I value I value friendship. I value growth. I value growth within friendships. Um, I value family, of course. I think everyone should. Um, but they're, my values aren't necessarily like very big. Like they're not like stuff that like I'm jamming into everything. They just happen. So it's
Yeah.
almost as if I can't even like tell you them because they just naturally happen. They naturally occur.
I mean, again, if someone asked me 20 years ago what my values are, like I would probably think of like the value meal at Wendy's. Like I just, I was not in that type of space at 17, 18 years old. I get maybe at 18, I would say honor, courage, and commitment because it was being yelled at me for 13 straight weeks. Saying family, growth, friendship, like, I bet if you ask yourself that question in a year, like write that down somewhere, send yourself an email and say, hey, next June, like, what are your values? I would assume you have a little bit more to add than
Yeah.
what you did today. And that's, I mean, that's life, right? That's the like growing. Like you don't know what you want to be when you grow up because you're always growing. Um, so I don't know. Maybe do that. I'd be curious to see what it is in a year for
Yeah.
all of us. Everyone, you, me, your dad, anyone listening right now. Come back in a year and ask yourself what your values are and how they differ from today and why.
And if at their core, the foundation remains intact. What I feel like you've laid out for us, Camden, is this foundation of growth and family and friendship, which I think is pretty awesome for you to have a foundation that is rooted in, frankly, connection and engagement is what you articulated. And that's, I don't think Joe or I would have said those things in 1993 or 2003. So thanks for sharing that.
What concerns you about the next steps in your life or the next year, right? You got whatever, a month or so till boot camp. Do you have any concerns about that period or boot camp, A school, etc.?
To be completely honest, the unknown is always scary for everyone, but there's really nothing. I'm looking forward to it so much that I the unknown even is fun. I can't wait to learn what I don't know. So I wouldn't say I'm really scared of anything. Obviously, like it's a big step and I don't want to mess anything up. So that might be one thing I'm like pretty scared of, something happening before or during that cuts it off. But other than that, there's there's really nothing.
Being sworn in by your father must have been pretty damn cool.
Yeah.
How was that experience?
That was I was so glad that was able to happen, and I wasn't sure if I wanted it to happen at first, so I'm glad I switched and decided that he would. I don't think there was a better person to do it. I'm so glad I picked him to do it.
Rooster, I want to know now from your perspective, what was that like? 24-year service member swearing in, your only boy into a branch of the armed services that you support, but that's not yours. I mean, if you look, for those who are watching too, right? You look in the background of Rooster, and I can see at least 3, 4, 5 Marine Corps things. So like, you swore your son into the military, which some parents these days would not even encourage, and into a different branch. What's going on in your mind?
Yeah, well, I mean, first of all, I'm glad I sought a commissioned and received a commission, because only a commissioned officer can administer the oath of enlistment. And so to be in a spot in life where I had that honor, and then to fast forward the clock so many years after becoming an officer, to be asked and given the honor of administering this oath yet again, but in this case to someone who is your blood, like, you cannot describe the honor. I mean, it's beyond honor. Like, to say an honor is almost like an understatement. Like, I have given that oath to you, Joe. I've re-enlisted you. I've re-enlisted many a person. But 2 things: I've never given the oath as an initial enlistment to anybody. I've always done it as re-enlistment, and I've obviously never given the oath, administered the oath to my own relative, my family, in this case, my son. So I would go so far as to share with you that, like, I cannot think off the top of my head right this minute a higher honor from my military career. That's a huge statement, but like, I challenge you to find something that compares to that. The passing of a torch from my journey to my son to go forth and do, and it's that whole idea of, like, when we retire, they say, we've got the watch. Like, it really resonates now. Like, he's got the watch. That's huge, man. And the Coast Guard, Joe, yeah, he had many choices, but he picked the one that helps people. Like, me and you picked the one that kills people. And he picked the one that helps people. And that's what you want in your life. You want to have people that you surround yourself with, and children that aspire to do good things for other people. And knowing that Lori and I have set the conditions, and that he has become the man that he is, that aims at helping people to the point where he's decided to give of his freedoms to go and to serve and to protect and to defend. The Coast Guard is the perfect choice. In fact, it's the best choice. I wouldn't want to see him in any other branches. So that's a long answer, and I appreciate y'all letting me dance there. But I'm just overjoyed. Laura and I are so proud, so proud.
Yeah, as you both should be, right? And it's awesome that Terry and Vicky got to be there to partake as well. And it's funny, not funny, right? But like, I was 50% of Kamden's journey to the military as a child, young adult, right? And I'd say that is going, well, I had 2 influential figures, my dad and my grandfather, and they were both Marines. Well, that's easy, right? I didn't take the second minutes, hours, days, weeks, year, as Kamden said, to explore another option based on something he liked, and then that being the water and boats and everything. I took the easy path, Plus, I was probably scared that if I went somewhere else, Bill was going to kick me in the teeth if he could get his leg up that high, right? So I was just like, I'm just going to do this, and 0 regrets. It's awesome. And the passing of the watch is kind of neat too, because I remember when my dad gave me his boot camp ring years ago. It was like, well, that's cool. You know what I mean? Like, thank you for that. But I concur. I mean, I have right here, master's of professional studies in Homeland Security. Like, I'm all about the Coast Guard. A couple weeks ago, my friend Andy was down, and I was telling him about Kamden and everything, and he worked for 5 years, Coast Guard headquarters in DC. So like him and I, you, the four of us all think the Coast Guard's great. And I tell Owen all the time, hey, you're going to go to the Coast Guard. So Kamden, you got 13 years to get commissioned, so then you can administer Owen's oath of enlistment.
That's a great point. And we're talking a lot here. I want to give Kamden a chance to kind of react to what he just heard. And at the same time, maybe tie in, what's your plans, man? Like, is this a career? Is this a 6 years? You're going for 6 years at least. What's your mindset? So that was a lot, man. So what do you want to say to all that?
Yeah, so I definitely want to make it a career. Because one thing I am stuck on right now is if I didn't make it a career, what would I do after? Because there is plenty of options, but I don't know if it's anything that I'm as intrigued in as the job that I'm going to do. So I want to make it a career, 20 plus, maybe hit 30, but we'll see. But yeah, I'd say definitely make it a career is the plan.
In that career, is there any plans for further education?
I haven't thought that far yet. If I do become an officer, I assume that's what you're speaking on.
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily.
So I mean, you have your dad and I, right? Both enlisted. I guess enlisted at one point, right? Both got educations. Your dad got commissioned. I just continued my education, but stayed enlisted. So I mean,
Okay.
you can get educated for yourself and to better yourself and to better your Coast Guardsmen, and then you can get an education to better yourself, better your Coast Guardsmen, and seek that commission. So I guess, do you just foresee yourself doing college in any capacity at any point ever?
I'm not sure. Maybe, but I'm at the point in my life right now where I'm going do what I'm doing so that I don't go to college. So it's kind of hard to say.
No, it's not, because I mean, I ran away from a job at the Navy Exchange to the Marine Corps because I hated my job, and I didn't even apply to college. It like wasn't a thing. So I was like, well, I don't like my job. I'm not going to school. I guess I am going to join the military. And that was what was that? Summer of 2003. So damn near 20 years ago to the day, probably. And then it was until like summer of 2008 that I even signed up for a class. So I mean, it took me 5 years. So I mean, and there's no rush at all. I was just curious. You have to. That's one of the things that I tell my junior Marines all the time. Education is important, but what's more important is doing it when you are ready. Don't do it because friends, family, the Corps, the Coast Guard says you have to get educated. Because if you're not ready for it, it's gonna have a reverse effect. So you have to do it when you're ready.
Damn, Joe, we're gonna quote that out, bro, because that's solid advice to everyone, not just a Marine in the reserves or a 17-year-old Kamden. Like I connected with that. I didn't go to college either out of high school. I went straight to the Marine Corps, and like you, it was 4, 5, 6 years later before I started to go into college classes. But when I went, I knocked the damn ball out of the park because I was ready. I wanted to be there, and I think that's wonderful way to serve that up. That's good. Kamden, what else is on your mind, man? Is this podcast conversation been what you would expected?
Yeah, I think that we touched all the points that I wanted to talk about. I don't know if I have anything else.
Well, this
is
is
like Forrest Gump. He's like, that's all I have to say about that.
Joe and I do this podcast because it's cool to hear other people's stories and to share other people's stories. But honestly, we also do it for a little bit of our own therapy. It's just way cheaper than some of the therapies that are out there. So how do you feel after chatting through these things? Do you feel a little lighter, a little better?
I'd say that the conversations we had today, I have more often than some people. Me and my friends, we come together and we talk about these things a lot to catch each other up and whatnot. And I feel that every time it lets, even if it's not something stressing you out or something that you're looking forward to or whatever, just saying something can always let you think it through more. It takes weight off your shoulders. It can do so much for you. So yeah, I definitely, again, like it always happens, I feel better after talking.
That's awesome, man. That's solid. That's good stuff. But you've done some other things in your day, like hockey and fishing. And are you going to continue to one day potentially get on the ice and maybe get in the net, or maybe any hockey or what's fishing in your future?
I don't know if I can speak on hockey, because if that happens, it would have to be something would have to happen for that. But fishing, I will definitely continue. I'll be in the Coast Guard, so I'll stay by the water. We're gonna go to Louisiana pretty soon here, and I'll definitely get some done there. But yeah, fishing is I think a bigger passion and hobby for me than I look at it as. I also skateboard, that's a hobby, but I don't think I'll continue that. I don't want to break a leg or something as I am going through my military career.
Well, as Joe might say, here in about 30 days, you'll have free medical again. So Joe's big on free medical. Yeah. Well, this has been fun, man. Joe, anything on your mind as we roll into the outro here, and give Kamden a final word here in just a minute to see what he wants to leave people with?
Not really. I'm a little surprised you said, I don't want to say hang up, but put skateboarding on the side, because I pictured you being on a cutter or whatever types of ship they are, and like you got your bag and you're getting ready to board, and you got like a fishing pole in one hand and your skateboard in the other, like doing ollies on the deck, like when you guys are just floating, like so I don't know, man. Definitely don't hurt yourself, but you never know.
Yeah, just cruise around a little bit.
And the same goes for hockey, if that's something you're still interested. I mean, look at remember Justin Keeling? Like, I mean, he played. Shea, who I think at Virginia Beach, still plays hockey. So I mean, it's still something you can do recreational to stay active and stay close to something that you did for a long time.
Yeah, it's been a while since I've even been on the ice, so it would have to be a slow adjustment to get back into that.
Oh yeah. Never know,
That's
man. You
good
might
stuff.
get stationed in like Sitka. You can like ice skate to work.
Well, this has been fun, man. Kamden, we appreciate you taking some time out of your honestly busy schedule of socializing and reflecting and partying with your friend group. I know you got a big party scheduled for this weekend. We're going to entertain everybody one last big hoorah. And I enjoyed having some time to talk through some things with you. Thank you again for joining us. We always like everyone who joins us to have the last word. What do you want to leave everybody with, man?
It's a lot of pressure. To everyone moving on to a new chapter in their life, don't be afraid to get into it. Just let it guide you. Don't try to take the wheel, because everything will be okay. That's all I got. That's all I've got.
That's
I'm
cool.
getting blown up. My phone's blowing up.
Oh, your phone's blowing up? You gotta go.
You took too much time.
Wow, that's awesome.
kidding.
All right, dude.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, bro. Hit leave when you're
Bye,
ready.
Joe.
See you, bro.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. He gone.
You know what? I got enough.
He's in charge.
We're done. This was good.
Yeah, we're done here. The structure of this building has reached its capacity.
Find your people, and if they make you feel sexy, even better.
As I try to get through this thing without emotion, right? Yeah. All right, raise your hand and repeat after me. I state your full name.
I, Kamden Rossiter,
Do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
to support and defend
to support and defend
the Constitution of the United States
the Constitution of the United States
against all enemies,
against all enemies,
foreign and domestic,
foreign and domestic,
that I will bear true faith
that I will bear true faith
and allegiance to the same,
and allegiance to the same,
and that I will obey
and that I will obey
the orders
the orders
of the President of the United States
of the President of the United States
and those officers appointed over me
and those officers appointed over me
according to regulations
according to
and the
regulations
Uniform Code
and the Uniform
of
Code
Military Justice.
of Military Justice.
So help me God.
So help me God.
All right.
Thank you guys all for coming, of course. You guys are a huge part of the journey that's got me here. So I thank all you guys.
Oh, I love you.
Love you too.
Congratulations, baby. So proud of you.